1. Intro. He found her letter on a quiet morning. The kind of morning that should have felt ordinary. But when he unfolded the paper and saw her handwriting, his chest tightened, because every line sounded like a goodbye she'd been whispering for years. Before we go deeper into this story, make sure you subscribe to Hidden Angle Podcast so you never miss a lesson life tries to teach you too late. 2. Setup. The life before. Emma had always moved through life with a kind of quiet grace, soft steps, gentle eyes, the kind of presence that made a room feel calmer without anyone realizing why. She wasn't loud, she wasn't demanding, she simply cared in a way that felt rare. She remembered the little things, the way Caleb liked his coffee slightly bitter, the old song he hummed when he was stressed, the way he pretended he didn't need comfort when work overwhelmed him. Caleb, on the other hand, lived life like every hour was borrowed. Meetings, deadlines, plans stacked on top of plans, always a new problem to solve. Always a new reason to say, "I'll make time later." He loved her, but he loved her in the way busy people love,
I'll be late.
Quietly, clumsily, assuming tomorrow would always be there to fix the things today broke. Their apartment held both warmth and distance. She waited for him at dinner more nights than she cared to admit. He rushed through conversations thinking she understood. And she did understand, just more deeply than he realized. Somewhere between all the tiny almost and nearlies, their love became a soft ache neither of them had the words to name. 3. The wound, the moment everything changed. It happened on a night that looked like any other, cold air drifting through the kitchen window, the dull hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. Emma had waited again, her dinner plate untouched, her phone face up on the table as if hope itself were glowing on the screen. Caleb had texted, running late, again, no apology, no explanation. Just the familiar distance disguised as routine. When he finally walked in, he dropped his keys on the counter, kissed her cheek absently, and said, "Long day, I'm exhausted," without noticing the redness in her eyes. She had cried quietly in the bathroom just minutes before he arrived, wiping her face until the mirror looked less like truth and more like survival. But when she tried to talk, just a small attempt to tell him she felt alone even when he was home, he brushed it off with a tired laugh.
Everything okay?
"Emma, you worry too much. Everything's fine." He thought those words were comfort, but to her, they were a closing door. Later that night, she found herself sitting on the cold kitchen floor, back against the cabinet, muffling her sobs so he wouldn't hear from the bedroom. That was the moment, the one that split something open in her. She realized she had become invisible in the one place she should have felt seen. It wasn't the late nights or forgotten plans that broke her. It was the way he looked right at her, and still couldn't hear her heart breaking. She reached for a notepad and began writing. Not to accuse him, not even to be understood, but because she needed somewhere to place the hurt he didn't notice. A letter she never meant to send, born in the quiet moment he walked past her pain without knowing it existed. 4. The quiet pain, what they never said. Emma learned to live in the spaces between his words, the pauses he never noticed, the silences he mistook for peace. She carried her hurt quietly, the way people do when they're afraid their truth will only become another burden. Most nights, she sat beside him on the couch while he answered emails or scrolled through whatever problem the world threw at him next. She would glance at him, hoping he'd look back long enough to see the heaviness she was trying to hold alone. But he didn't, not because he didn't care, simply because he didn't know how to see what she never said out loud. There were moments when she almost spoke. Tiny openings, when he sighed deeply, when he massaged his temples, when he finally closed his laptop at midnight. She would inhale, ready to confess something simple yet enormous, "I miss you. And you're right here." But the words always dissolved before reaching her lips. She remembered her mother's voice saying, Strong girls don't cry for help. And so she didn't. Instead, she cried in places where walls, not people, were witnesses, inside the shower, in her car outside the grocery store, at the kitchen sink with the water running so he wouldn't hear. She kept her tears soft, careful, polite, the kind of tears that leave no trace except in the heart that sheds them. Caleb noticed little things but interpreted them all wrong. He saw her tired smile and assumed she'd had a long day. He saw her empty plate at dinner and thought she wasn't hungry. He noticed her quietness and believed she just needed rest. He never imagined that her silence wasn't calm, it was surrender. What hurt her most wasn't that he failed to fix anything. It was that he didn't even realize something needed fixing. And what hurt him, later, was discovering she had been fighting loneliness inches away from him. In the same bed, under the same roof, breathing the same air, yet feeling oceans apart.
Right, I'll review
They
those
both
documents
stayed
and get
gentle
back to
with
you
each
by end of
other,
day.
even in the unraveling. But gentleness is not the same as understanding. And in the quiet they never questioned. A distance grew, soft, invisible, and devastatingly real. 5. The turning point, when he finally saw the truth. Caleb didn't expect to find the letter. He was looking for a charger in her desk drawer when he saw it, folded neatly. His name written in the soft, careful handwriting he knew better than his own. At first, he thought it was something simple, maybe a note she forgot to give him. But when he opened it, the air in the room shifted. Her words were gentle, but they carried a weight that settled heavily on his chest. She wrote about nights she felt invisible beside him, meals she ate alone while pretending she wasn't waiting, and tears she tried to hide because she didn't want to be another responsibility. He could hear her voice in every sentence, quiet, steady, heartbreakingly patient, but the line that shattered him came near the end. I cried next to you, and you never heard me. Caleb sank onto the couch, the letter trembling in his hands. Suddenly, the moments he once brushed off replayed with brutal clarity, the tightness in her smile, the way she hesitated before speaking, the softness in her voice when she said, "I'm fine." He realized she hadn't been asking for more. She had simply been asking to be seen, and he had missed every single plea, disguised in silence. 6. The resolution, the forgiveness, goodbye, healing. Caleb drove to her sister's place with the letter still folded in his jacket, as if keeping it close could somehow undo the truth written inside. He practiced what he wanted to say a dozen times, but every version felt small compared to the weight she had carried alone. When Emma stepped outside, wrapped in a soft coat and looking both tired and peaceful, he felt something inside him sit down quietly, like guilt finally finding a chair. I didn't know, he said, voice unsteady. I should have seen you. Emma didn't cry, and she didn't look angry. She just looked done. Not with him, but with the version of herself that kept shrinking to fit into the spaces he left. She listened without interrupting, her hands tucked into her sleeves the way she always did when protecting herself. I'm not leaving because I stopped loving you, she said gently. I'm leaving because I stopped loving the way I felt around you. Those words hurt, but they didn't cut, they clarified. She forgave him easily, the way quiet hearts do. Not because he deserved it, but because she needed the peace that comes with letting go of what has already broken. They stood there in the cold, two people who had once promised forever, now learning that sometimes love survives best from a distance. When she turned to walk away, it wasn't dramatic, it was soft, inevitable, almost graceful, and for the first time, he didn't rush after her. He let her go, because for the first time, he finally heard her. 7. Outro, the lesson they learned. In the end, their story wasn't about who was right or who stayed. It was about learning that silence can be as loud as a scream, and that love only survives when we choose to truly see each other. If this story touched you or reminded you of someone you care about, share it with them. Tell me in the comments what part spoke to your heart. Hit the like button if it resonated. And don't forget to subscribe to Hidden Angle Podcast for more stories that help you slow down, reflect, and listen a little deeper.